Joey, we like movies about gladiators.
Well, I'm not your bro.
You're adults. It's time you started acting like it.
Hey, bud, what's your problem?
I ate your pal Dipface.
Used to not give a fuck about discretion. What the fuck, man?
We were talking about a specific producer the other day, and I thought it might be a good lead into that.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I want to continue to talk about music producers because I think they can have this effect on what's going on. You know, in the example of I'm gonna mess up his name, Jason. I'm gonna need your help. You know, he's the metal producer. He produced Sepultura, Slipknot. Ross
Robinson. Yeah.
Ross Robinson. Thank you so much. I was afraid I was gonna mess up the R. So, you know, you have the example of him and that he, like, there's a story that he was like throwing candles at Slipknot as they're recording that one record. And so, I mean, the reason I bring that up is because it points to what producers are in the modern era and how they can affect a record and the way it's going to sound. It's fabric, if you will.
Yeah.
So
I think there's the title in itself has there's some confusion around what it actually means, right? And whether you're talking about music or television or movies, the title producer is pretty amorphous.
Sure.
It can mean a lot of different things. It can mean that you're the technical hand on things. It can mean that you're the money man on things. It can mean that you're the project manager and that you're just in charge of like making sure that all the pieces get to where they need to go. So,
it can just be a credit line that you got paid for because you just you helped usher the movie into production or whatever.
Right. So this fits perfectly with who I want to talk about.
That's interesting because I want to delve into the definition just a little bit.
Okay.
Because you're right. If you look up the definition of producer, because this has often been a query of mine. So you look up the definition of producer and you will see that they're usually the person that's in charge of getting the money for a project. So literally just collecting the money and
that would be executive producer.
Okay. Well, so then continuing on with that. So what I found with music though, so that used to be the case in like the 50s. Or it was more project manager, like you're saying. It was just the person who pushed the record button and made sure that everybody was there and all that stuff. But that changed, and probably George Martin might have been the first one to become a part of the fabric of production like that. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, in that era, you also have what's the guy, the hair and the shooting and
Wall of Sound, right?
Well, yeah, right, exactly. You know what I'm talking about. Okay, so I'll think of his name. But you want to talk about Rick Rubin.
Yes.
Okay. So
I mean, I do and I don't. I think this all stemmed from, I don't know, a text conversation that we had the other day.
Well, because I wanted to. I was talking about this conversation he had with Sturgill Simpson, and I actually really like the podcast that Rick Rubin does, the Broken Record stuff. Yeah. And I pretty much like Rick Rubin too. So when you said, you know, basically bleep that dude, I'm like, I gotta hear why. Like, I'm just intrigued, and you still haven't told me why. Yeah. So let's start there. Why you don't like Rick Rubin?
Okay, I think I should probably clear that up. I was being no, I mean, you know that I kind of speak
controversially, just
and like I can be a little hyperbolic about stuff sometimes, and we know that. So I want to be clear that I don't hate Rick Rubin. What I will say is I think he is maybe one of the most grossly overcredited people in the music industry.
You know, I will say I want to hear more about this, but there is a band they're kind of like in the jam bandy side of things, and no one's gonna really know who they are. But they were in San Francisco. They were big. They got a major label record at a time, you know, in the 2000 teens, right? Okay. And you know, they were being courted by producers. They were thinking about self-producing as they had in the past, and then Rick Rubin approached them, and they got the record out. It sounds good, but they said that if they could, they would go back and do it without him because of his schedule and the complications, and he wasn't really doing it. You know, like it took them forever to record it.
Yeah. So let's just start at the very beginning.
Ooh, run DMC.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's part of it, and the whole hip hop thing, right? I think Rick Rubin, especially in the early days, and there are, you know, pioneers of hip hop that will say the same thing. that he has kind of followed this model of somebody coming in and scooping up a movement or scooping up artists and kind of appropriating it and writing it. Culture vulturing, right?
Yeah, I don't. Okay, continue.
So
I feel it's cool. I'll disagree. No big deal. Continue.
yeah, no, and that's the point of this, right? So
Yeah.
that's part of it. Although I will say it's a very small part, but I think he has he gets credited for things that were already happening. You know, if you look at his production credits in these early records, it's not really him. I mean, you got Hank Shockley and, you know, Jam Master Jay and all these other guys that are really doing the heavy lifting of it. He is simply putting his name on something at the end of the day. And he does that a lot. And he still does that.
Okay, so I'll disagree, and I'll go into my disagreement here.
Okay.
So I don't think he ever says that he was like writing raps or making the beats. I mean, he definitely made some beats, and that's irrefutable. But so I think that without him, though, he was a producer in the sense that he was making things happen, money wise. He was finding other artists. He was doing things that they had a passion for. And when you look at the Beastie Boys in particular, License to Ill, I think it doesn't happen without him. That you don't have that record being made.
It wouldn't sound like it did.
It wouldn't. I don't think he would have it, because he became a huge part of the motivating factor behind it. Like the Beastie Boys might not have even made a rap record at that time, or not the record we have. And he talks about making it with them, and it being more of like them trying to make a comedy record. You know what I mean? Than really trying to make a real a hip hop record. And I saw this clip of that Run DMC movie the other day, and it's a clip where LL Cool J comes into the studio and they're like, "Hey, we're not taking any more auditions right now." It's so overmade. It's bad.
Yeah.
But he's in there, and he's young Rick Rubin, pre Buddhist white robes thing.
Right.
And I think that he is a producer that. Sure, there's records that would have gotten made without him, but I think there's a ton of examples, and from all over the musical spectrum, that's not the case. I mean, I don't think producers come when you're saying that the culture vulture thing. I don't think that most producers aren't the people making the thing. They just facilitate it happening, or help them drive a sound in. And so I think maybe he gets, as you said, over credited, but I'm not sure that's him. It's him asking for this over credit. I think people may be giving him too much credit.
No, I disagree. I think he takes the credit, and there's a lot of evidence of that, and we can get into that too. But
bring it, son. Where's your evidence? Okay.
Well, so the next thing is his production style. Is basically saying he's aping, at least with the rock records that he started being pulled in to produce because of his name and his stature that he held. He's basically saying, give me the same sound that Mutt Lange got on these rock records that I love. Give me the AC/DC drum sound, give me the Led Zeppelin guitar sound, and that's what it is. And that's what a lot of his records is. And, when you talk about the Beastie Boys, all those Zeppelin samples are Rick Rubin, because those are the two bands that he references a lot, is AC/DC and Led Zeppelin. Nothing wrong with that. Great benchmarks there, right?
Yeah, for sure.
What you start to see as his career goes along, you start looking at the credits of his career. Now, a lot of these great records that his name is on, he's listed as the executive producer. So that's for Def Jam and Def American, whatever. He's facilitating the finances of it, right?
Right.
Signing a band, right? So that's my contention, is that Rick Rubin is really an A&R guy. He's not a producer from the standpoint that I look at it. So when we get into these rock records, Start looking at the credits.
I'm looking.
Start looking at who's engineering these records that you love.
Right.
You'll start to see some familiar names. You're going to see Jim Scott. You're going to see Brendan O'Brien. You're going to see Sylvia Massey. You're going to see a lot of people that are producers.
Right. That you're saying that are actually, and he's just kind of like, well.
Yeah, so he's taken on the role. It's more like a movie director, right? Where he's putting the pieces in place. And that's not to say that's not without credit, but like a great example is the first Black Crowes record.
See, I'm glad that you brought that up, because as soon as I saw that, I was like, okay, how are you going to talk shit about this record that you love so much?
All right, so let me tell you the story. George Drakoulias was listed as the producer on it. He's actually an A&R guy too. If you look at the engineering credits, it's Brendan O'Brien. That's Brendan O'Brien's record.
Yeah. I don't doubt that.
After the success of that record, after it was a hit, it had like fucking 6 singles on it or something crazy like that.
Mm-hmm.
After that, Rick Rubin retroactively put his name on there as producer because it was doing well.
It says in Wikipedia, credited on the out sleeve only after the album became successful.
Right. So, and he's done this a lot. So, one of my favorite records that I still listen to, people can mock me for, is the second Danzig record. That record is so fucking good. The drum sound on it is fantastic. It's just a really, really good rock and roll record. And, you can Google
Brendan O'Brien
and all that. It's Brendan O'Brien. And I think Sylvia Massey was on that one too.
Yeah, I don't see where there's credit for that, but I think we go back to Brent, how amazing Brendan O'Brien is.
Well, and I'm not going to
second show we brought him up in.
I know, and I'm not going to dispute that with you. I think it only makes my point more for me.
Yeah. Well, it also tells me that if a record's produced in Atlanta, there's a good chance that he had something to do with it. Especially a rock record where the musicians go to
maybe
Atlanta.
back then, yes.
Well, honestly, on almost every Pearl Jam record right now, you'll see that they recorded some of it in Atlanta.
Is that right?
And I'm willing to bet if we go down the rabbit hole with that, we're going to find that they were recording it in a studio. And
yeah, I mean, Mastodon did one of their more recent records. He was the producer on it. Not my favorite Mastodon record, but that's neither here nor there. So you may be right. They may be doing a lot of that here.
I'm just looking at this and I see.
So the one on that list that I can't, for whatever reason, I'm going to have to give it to him is Deloused in the Comatorium. Okay, so Omar is listed as co-producer on that, and we all know that he
control freak.
Well, he knows what he wants, and he has crafted the sound of that band. So that he's listed as co-producer on there, I'm not surprised, but it just makes me wonder what Rick Rubin's role was in that record, because that's like to me that's one that stays on the wall. Deloused is
that's an amazing record.
And, I mean, still to
it holds up today. Like if you play it for someone who hadn't heard it, they'd be like, "Oh," you could tell them it came out this year, and they would believe you.
Yeah,
there's nothing that dates it.
It's an incredible record. It really is. And even if you're, for somebody that's not like into guitar music or prog or like heavy rock or whatever you want to kind of categorize that as, I think you could sell that record. Like if you put it subliminal, like at a really low level on in the background, and some of those melodies start to kind of worm into the brain.
Totally.
And you're like, they do that thing that Tool used to do where there's only like one repeat of the chorus or the refrain or whatever. So you're like waiting for it, and it's so good. You're waiting for it, and then it hits, and you're like, oh yeah, that's the good stuff.
They do. The other thing that's interesting is there's on those records you can find kind of examples of almost everything, maybe even into like a little bit of pop, like to the point where I was closing a restaurant I was working at one night, and a friend was coming to how do I say this appropriately? Bring me something. And so I'm playing Deloused in the Comatorium, and it gets to like I think it's Televators or whatever.
Yeah.
The friend's like, "Oh," and this person was really into electronic music, and they're like, "Oh, are you playing trance tonight?" And I'm like, Kind of, yeah. I mean, it's like that. That's what this is. So that makes sense. I mean, so
when did that record come out? Like 2000 or 98 or something? No,
I think
Tremulant would have been like more 98ish, but
yeah, I think
2001, 2002, maybe.
I'm looking for the yeah, it was 2003.
Okay, yeah.
Wow. Same year they produced 99 Problems. So the thing I would like to say is that there's probably plenty of acts that had this experience with Rick Rubin, where the one you're describing, but there are plenty of people who give him a lot of credit, and they're bands that don't need to do that. You know, like the Red Hot Chili Peppers would toss accolades upon his door.
Brendan O'Brien produced those records too. I'm serious. Look up.
I don't
Blood
disagree.
Sugar Sex Magic.
Okay,
Brendan O'Brien.
I believe you. There's no. I'm not arguing the facts.
Yeah.
I'm arguing a thing that you and I can't know. It's like what the effect was in the room at the time. And
you know what it is? I hate the whole fucking guru shtick. Something about that, like it makes me icky.
I know it does. I love that about you too.
He's one of those dudes that, like, I can't believe Rick Rubin didn't get Me Too. There had to have been some kind of
maybe he's not. Maybe
he's not.
Maybe
because he's the perfect candidate for that. You know.
Yeah. Well. Okay. So I don't know, man. He tends to land in the right side of the street for me. Like he owns, like the house that
he's chilling with Russell. Who knows what him and Russell were up to?
He owns the house that the band recorded, you know, Shangri-La.
Yeah.
So he owns that house. He also owns one of Bob Dylan's tour buses from like the 70s that's parked there.
So I mean, he's got a boner already.
Yeah, dude, he's got like, I just want to go hang out at the house. Like Rick Rubin doesn't even need to be there. But like, you know, I can just, Shangri-La is the house where the band, they're figuring out they're breaking up, but they're recording in Los Angeles and they're living there with their families. They're having family dinner.
About?
The band,
right?
Yeah.
Right.
So they're the progenitors of this house. They put the studio in there and all that. And, you know, the fabric of that is just so amazing. I think.
Yeah, there's something to be said for preserving the history of all that, I think.
Absolutely. And I think that your problem with Rick Rubin is not a new problem with you and people who aren't artists but are the facilitators of art, you know. Right. And I think traditionally you've looked at, as long as I've known you, you've looked at those people with a little distrust, and I love that about you. I think it's a good thing. I think it's healthy to be an artistic, creative person and have a little bit of distrust for those who are making money off of other artists. Right.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's a good thing. It's healthy, and it's good to have people like that are in your circle.
Yeah.
You know, that don't get swept up in the BS of personality and what have you. And then there's me, and I think that you know, I think he brings something to the table when he is in the room, and even if you and more power to him to recognize that he's not the best engineer in the world, and that he needs really good people, and he knows who they are.
Yeah.
And he knows who the people are to bring into the room to make that shit happen. I mean, that's what he's there for, you know what I mean? And if just his like guru vibe thing makes it all work for everybody, great. I mean, he's definitely produced a lot of records I don't like, you know what I mean? And you know, he's like I'm pretty sure it's the first episode of the podcast, the Broken Record with him and Malcolm Gladwell. And they're talking about Eminem's, like at the time it was his new record. And I couldn't see what all the hype was about. You know, when they were talking about the recording of the song, I was like, oh, okay, you know, great. You know,
another Eminem record. Okay.
Yeah. Nothing against them. It just didn't, I just couldn't catch the same buzz that they were on.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I didn't catch it, but I will say that you can hear the reverence for Rick Rubin when artists who he talks to aren't necessarily even people that he's worked with, you know. They just know, and they have a high level of reverence for him and a respect. And I think that to me that says a lot. And they're artists that I appreciate. And the two that I can think of off the top of my head are Sergio Simpson, who I know he doesn't suffer fools, right? Yep. And then the other one is Tyler the Creator, who I'm not a super huge fan of, his art necessarily, but I am a fan of his.
I like his vibe. I don't necessarily listen to his music.
Sure. But I feel the same way, and his grind is so amazing, and he's not afraid to just go come out left field because it's what he's feeling.
Dropping the gay freestyle on on the radio was like fucking all timer.
I mean,
amazing. I'm gonna fuck with so many people right now.
Well, and I think I think his early output definitely had that vibe to it. Like he was trying to get noticed by causing problems.
Yeah.
But I think the newer work speaks for itself in that he is clearly making the art he wants to make, and not necessarily it's going to sell a bunch of records, even though it has done that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I like his button pushing quality.
I bet you do. But with that said, so I think that my point would be that looking to these artists, who
and that's a fair, that's totally fair. What I would say is there are a lot of artists that don't feel that way.
I would agree with you. I mean, I don't think you could be in a position like Rick Rubin's and look at this list of records that he's been involved with and have not pissed people off.
No, and it, I think a lot less of it is it's probably more from omission than anything else. Like him just being kind of the flagship of the record, but not really have anything to do with the actual production of it. I could be wrong about that, but that seems to be, I've heard other people say the same thing that we were talking about earlier, where like, he's supposed to be producing this record and he shows up and he just, the engineer is running the show. He might check in every once in a while, say, how's it going? Let me hear something,
Yeah. Well, and one of the things I heard was that, in this particular band, and I think we should revisit this with a little more info too, but like with this particular band, Howlin' Rain is their name. And with them in particular, I think he got so invasive in the songwriting process that it was hard because, like the thing that stands out in my mind is, there was a line and they said babe on it, and Rick Rubin was just like, that's just so overused and trite. Like, I hate that word, like let's find a different word.
Right.
And, I mean, it's still stuck in my head to this day because it's like, this isn't Dylan Thomas. Like, this isn't Sylvia Plath. This is just it's a rock and roll song. Like, let's not overthink the use of babe.
Well, some of that it kind of rings of like somebody who's not involved in the process, just trying to like put a little. I mean, I'm sure you've worked with people like that where they're not really involved, but they feel like they have to justify their involvement by adding like a little spice or something, and it's not always the best idea.
Right. Yeah. No. I mean, I think it's you're going to run into that no matter what. I think, especially in any creative process. There's only so much hanging back any truly creative person can do. And so, or just get out of the way entirely. And so I do agree that making the case for your continued involvement can be, little things like that.
Right. Well, that's probably enough about old Rick. I'm sure he's not too worried about what some jackass in his basement has to say about him anyway. So let's just suffice to say that I have much more appreciation for somebody like Steve Albini, who still like charges the same to produce a record as he did in 1988, and
well, the thing
just getting on the waiting list.
Yeah, the thing that he did with Nirvana and Euro was really cool. Where basically he told them, and there was this huge budgeted record. And he was
like, they're gonna ruin this.
Yeah. Well,
they're not gonna like what we do.
Yeah, and he gave them this, like he got offered this huge, check, and he said, "Look, this is my fee.
Yeah.
Anyone who charges you that much is stealing money from you.
Yeah.
And let's just do this thing." And he was like, we'll record in a week. Anyone who's taking longer than that, if the songs are written, is stealing money from you. Basically. I think
Steve Albini is a real motherfucker. That's the fucking dude. That's like he doesn't put his fingerprint all over shit. He likes to record live. That's his thing. Like, if you want an analog live recording with most of it done in a live room, he's your guy. And he's going to charge you the same rate. He charges the same rate that he charges to just use his engineer.
Yeah.
So he's basically just engineering the record for you. And it's affordable. Like if you're, I don't know, if you're like a small touring band and you want to put out an EP, you can go record with Steve Albini. It's affordable.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, if you can, like you said, if you can get on the list, right? And he's not a person that's just going to suffer anybody either. You know,
that's true. He has to like your music.
He's a super curmudgeon. Like, I mean, all the interviews, I know you do. I know he fits right up your alley. I don't know why you guys aren't hanging out already. No, I think
probably wouldn't like me, but that's okay.
Well, curmudgeons tend to rub other curmudgeons the wrong way.
That's true.
No, I think you're right. I mean, I'm not always a fan of the stuff he's done, but like, I mean, I think that what you're saying is true about him. He deserves all the accolades and respect he gets, and he stays true to his game. He is not. He's
Jesus Lizard, Liar, and that's all you have to say.